Why? What would there be to be gained, and who is behind it? And I want to take you through a timeline that popped into my mind. Now, this is just a theory, but just take a look as we look back at this year. What happened at the very beginning of this year? At the very beginning of this year, we saw this headline. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, signs landmark trade deal with China to fix wrongs of the past. Remember, we currently at this moment do not have a pandemic in the United States of America. We're seeing some people dropping over in China. This article goes on to say, just to be clear, the 86-page agreement calls for China to increase its purchases of U.S. goods by more than $200 billion over the next 2 years, from soybeans to automobiles. It also adds new restrictions against Beijing, forcing U.S. companies operating in China to disclose their technologies and against devaluing its currency. Okay, so that's January. What happens in February? In February, all of a sudden, this non-doctor know-it-all who has been, having Tony Fauci work for him and others, Bill Gates comes forward with this. This is February 28th. Bill Gates says to the world, coronavirus may be the once-in-a-century pathogen we've been worried about. Now remember, at this point, Tony Fauci was saying, there's no need to be alarmed. It really doesn't look like there's an issue. Even the WHO is saying there really doesn't seem to be an issue. I think China is handling this okay and everyone's going to be okay. Then suddenly, Bill Gates says, no, stop the presses. This is the once-in-a-century pathogen I've been warning everybody about. This is why I've been hosting Event 201, where we're going to, play war games with a virus, maybe a coronavirus, and we're going to have fake news organizations making videos talking about how no one will wear their masks. And ironically, as you've seen the film Plandemic, they laid out perfectly this roadmap for what we experienced moments after Bill Gates saying, this is what we planned for, this is the big one. And then suddenly we start having him work with the WHO. We know that he's the second biggest funder of the WHO. Well, Donald Trump, President of the United States, starts having real issues with the information coming out of China, and we get this headline. Remember, now we're talking, this is April 14th, just over a month after Bill Gates declares this is the once-in-a-century virus. Trump announces a formal freeze on WHO funding pending an investigation. He declares that he's concerned with China's infiltration and working with the WHO to somehow hide what's really going on in there so that the rest of the world could have protected themselves. Well, that's April 14th. On April 15th, what does Bill Gates do? He pours a ton of money into the WHO. He's now the leading funder of the WHO. And here's the headline. Gates ups pandemic funds to $250 million, says Trump, WHO move makes no sense. Okay, so now when you're looking at it, you take away the United States of America, you got the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation on top. Just 4 rows down, Gavi, another Bill and Melinda Gates concoction to deliver vaccines around the world. So really, you put it together, and Bill Gates is in charge of the WHO. And then we start hearing some very interesting things about who in the WHO has the most power. Take a look at this headline. China is injecting millions into WHO as the U.S. cuts funds. Experts say Beijing is trying to boost its influence over the agency and is deeply compromised chief. It goes on to say China is pumping millions of dollars into the World Health Organization, an action one expert describes as a political move meant to boost its superficial credentials. Japan's Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Taro Aso also referred to WHO last month as the Chinese Health Organization, referring to its close ties to Beijing. John Lee, who served as a national security advisor to Australian Foreign Minister Julie Bishop, said the agency's leadership had become captured by countries such as China, putting its credibility to the test. When WHO leadership is called to make decisions of global health concern, such as with the current pandemic, such decisions tend to be overly influenced by political rather than health priorities, Lee said. In this context, Dr. Tedros, who's head of the WHO, is deeply compromised and his credibility is heavily damaged, he added. So let me get this straight. January, we finally work out a trade problem we have had arguably for decades. China, and remember, there was about 2 years of a trade war going on with China, tariffs being thrown around, and finally we got to the table. The United States of America gets to even the playing field, move $200 billion over 2 years coming our direction from China. We're also going to not let them just use our companies to manufacture, what, iPhones and things to spy on us and technologies like 5G. Our country wants to know all the technologies that anything that's going to come into our country and anything American companies are going to work on. That's January. There seems to be a weird cold virus in China. Then Bill Gates, the leading actor in the World Health Organization, if we take out the United States of America, declares, oh my God, this is the once-in-a-century pandemic. It's a total novel disease. No one's seen it before. We're all going to die. He even funds the guys that put together the imperial model. There's connections there. The imperial model starts telling us millions are going to die from this virus. A total overstatement, of course. And then China becomes the powerful dictator of the WHO. And what is the WHO doing? Dictating how the world is going to respond to this pandemic. And the CDC and the FDA and all the health agencies around the world drop into lockstep. Well, when I thought about that, I thought, huh. And then somebody tweeted out a discussion about the GDP growth in the United States of America and around the world. A chart went up. I want to take you through this for a moment because I think this is really disturbing. This is 2017. As you can see, most of the world is really doing good. The United States has a GDP growth of 2.3%. China, really, really solid. Now, right about here, we see that Trump is going to start a trade war. He's working on trying to even the playing field with China. The next year, 2018, the United States is up to 3%. They grow 3% over the previous year. China's holding strong. We're gaining on them. And then in 2019, still positive growth, 2.2% growth. China still looks like that leader, and our president's been talking about that. And so what happens? At the end of 2019, going to 2020, remember, we finally get that trade deal that is going to put us in the catbird seat in the United States of America. No longer are we going to trade to a deficit. And then this pandemic hits, as I've shown you. Now brace yourself for what happened to the world's economics in 2020. Just take that in for a moment. Remember that giant green piece of land, the one giant active nation in the world right now, while everybody else is starving, while everybody else is dying, China has all of their manufacturing online. China is even partying. They're throwing the biggest parties in the world. No one's masking. Everybody's back to work. This is what China looks like, the home of the coronavirus. The leaders of the WHO working with Bill Gates and Tony Fauci. Meanwhile, in the United States of America, after 3 years of brilliant growth, we now have bread lines. Food lines as far as the eye can see. Unemployment is up through the roof. People are losing their jobs everywhere. The greatest economic power at the beginning of 2020 is now in a massive, massive crash. Take me back to that last China map. Look at this. How is it that a virus that comes out of China, right next to a Wuhan lab that Tony Fauci purposefully sent $3 million to help fund over there, and this deadly supposed virus comes out, yet the one place it did not shut down, The one place that is not destroyed, the one place that is still working and manufacturing and supplying the world that is on fire in red, devastating destruction, that same place that had the virus, where it originated from, and drove the WHO and funded it to make all the decisions for the world, it's the only powerful nation that is still growing. And then, as we move forward in this election, I'm not talking about presidents. I'm talking about who is our president, whether it's Joe Biden or Donald Trump, who's going to be on their staff.